All right, so are you ready to dive deep today? Because we are going down a rabbit hole.
Ooh, sounds intriguing.
That might just completely change how you think about power in America.
Hmm.
We're really tackling this whole idea,
Yeah.
that the president of the United States is like the most powerful person in the world.
Right. That's what we always hear.
But is that really the truth?
You think?
Well, our main source for this deep dive is an article called The Influence of Power Beyond the Presidency in the United States.
I've heard of that one.
And let me tell you,
Yeah.
it will make you think.
Oh, I bet.
So to start off, like the very foundation of it all,
Okay.
the Constitution,
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's designed to prevent tyranny, which is great.
Of course.
But it also like throws up some major roadblocks
Yeah.
for any president, if they actually want to make big changes.
It's true. It's that balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got the president elected by the people, supposed to lead the country.
Uh-huh.
But then you've got Congress and the Senate,
Mm-hmm.
also elected by the people.
Right.
And they have the power to basically stop the president if they want to.
Yeah, and then on top of that,
What?
you've got these intelligence agencies like the CIA and the FBI.
Oh,
like,
right.
They're like so independent sometimes.
I know, right?
It's almost like they're their own like branch of the government.
Yeah, yeah.
And the article even talks about times when they've like hidden important information from the president.
Like kept secrets.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you remember that situation with the CIA
Which one?
where they supposedly restricted like the flow of intelligence to the Trump administration?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty extreme example
It is.
of how these agencies can just exert power,
For sure.
totally independent of the president.
Yeah.
They shape the narrative, influence decisions, but all from like behind the scenes.
Kind of spooky when you think about
It
it.
is. It makes you wonder, like,
Yeah.
who is really in control? And speaking of powerful forces that we don't always see,
What's that?
we have to talk about something that President Eisenhower warned us about
Hmm.
all the way back in 1961.
A while ago.
The military-industrial complex,
Right.
Eisenhower's farewell address was
Yeah.
like prophetic in a lot of ways.
Uh-huh.
He talked about the growing power of the military and the defense industry and how their interests could get like all mixed up with the government's. And here we are decades later,
Still dealing with it.
still dealing with the exact issues he was talking about.
It's crazy.
And all of that is driven by like a ton of money.
Oh, I'm sure.
In 2023 alone,
Yeah.
the Pentagon got a budget of over $886 billion.
Billion.
With a B.
Wow, that's hard to even imagine.
It's almost impossible to comprehend that amount of money.
It really is.
And then when you think about those like 5 major defense contractors,
Which ones?
Lockheed Martin, Boeing,
Mhm.
Northrop Grumman, Raytheon Technologies, General Dynamics,
Yeah.
you realize they have like a huge stake in keeping military spending high.
Of course, they're businesses.
Exactly. They're publicly traded companies,
Right.
and they have to answer to shareholders who, want profits.
Makes sense.
So what does that mean?
I don't know.
It means that war,
Right.
or even just like the threat of war,
Right.
can be incredibly profitable
Wow.
for some.
For some, yeah.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
course.
Who really benefits from conflict?
It's a good pill.
And it's not just the defense industry that has power in Washington.
Yeah.
The article also talks about
Wow.
corporate lobbying,
Wow.
specifically in areas like pharmaceuticals and agriculture.
Oh, yeah. We all know that happened.
We do, but the extent of it is kind of shocking.
Oh, I bet.
So lobbying is basically trying to influence government decisions. And corporations, especially in those industries,
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals, agriculture,
Right.
they've gotten so good at it. It's true.
They spend like billions of dollars every year
Right.
just to get access to lawmakers
Wow.
and to shape legislation
Uh-huh.
to make sure the policies favor them,
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then you've got that whole revolving door thing
Oh,
where
wow.
people go back and forth
Yeah.
between working in the government
Uh-huh.
and then high-paying jobs
Okay.
in the industries they used to regulate.
Yeah.
It's like this little club
All right.
where everyone knows each other.
Right.
And it makes you wonder whose interests are really being served.
Good question.
A classic example of this is the pharmaceutical industry's power
Okay.
over drug pricing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
in the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
unlike a lot of other developed countries,
Okay.
there are very few regulations
Oh.
on how much pharmaceutical companies can charge for their stuff.
Wow.
So what happens?
What?
We end up with some crazy high prices
I bet.
for medications that people need, like to live. That's not good.
Do you remember that drug
Which one?
for severe infections?
Mm.
That went from $13.50 to $750.
Wow.
Like almost overnight.
That's insane.
That wasn't an accident.
No.
That was the result of years
Oh.
of lobbying and cultivating relationships with the people who make the decisions.
Yeah.
And what are the
Yeah.
consequences?
I don't know.
People are having to ration their medication.
Seriously.
They skip doses.
Wow.
Or they just go without
That's awful.
because they can't afford it.
Wow.
It's like a moral crisis disguised as just,
I know.
a market doing its thing.
Messed up.
It feels like a betrayal,
Of what?
of the public trust.
Yeah.
You have these elected officials
Right.
who are supposed to be representing the people,
Exactly.
but then they turn around
Yeah.
and make decisions
Mm-hmm.
that benefit corporations
Right.
and their wealthy shareholders.
Makes you think.
It really does. It makes you question,
Yeah.
who is really accountable
Yeah.
in a system where money and influence
Yeah.
can just trump the will of the people.
That's deep.
We'll explore that more in part 2.
Okay.
But first, let's talk about another center of power
Okay.
that operates in the shadows.
Ooh. Mysterious?
The intelligence community.
Right, like the CIA.
Exactly. They're powerful.
They are. Intelligence agencies like the CIA,
Mm-hmm.
they have this unique position of power
Uh-huh.
because they control access to information that is like essential for national security.
That's true.
And they have this long history
Yeah,
of operating on their own
I know.
with a lot of autonomy.
Right.
And sometimes
Yeah.
that autonomy means
What?
acting against what the president wants.
Oh, wow.
The article brought up that case
What case?
where the CIA withheld intelligence from the Trump administration,
Right.
which brings us to this like really crucial point.
What's that? If even the president can't always control the flow of information, then who can?
Exactly.
What does that say about the balance of power?
Good question.
It's a little unsettling.
It is.
These agencies are secretive.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of public oversight.
Right.
And they have this immense power that can be used to shape events,
True.
both here and in other countries.
It's true.
It's something that deserves a lot more attention than it gets.
It really does.
But before we go down that rabbit hole,
Okay.
let's switch gears for a minute
All right.
and talk about something that affects all of us
What's that?
every single day.
Mm.
The economy.
Oh, yeah.
It's a common misconception
What is?
that the president has like ultimate control over the economy.
Right.
While they can definitely influence it,
Mm-hmm.
through policies and appointments,
Mhm.
there are other forces at play
I bet.
that are often a lot more powerful.
Okay.
The article mentioned entities like the Federal Reserve,
Yeah.
global markets,
Mhm.
and even these massive private corporations
Right.
as having a ton of economic power.
That makes sense.
We hear about these things in the news all the time,
You do.
but it's hard to grasp,
Mm.
how much influence they really have.
Yeah, I get it.
Let's take BlackRock, for example,
Okay.
one of the world's biggest investment management corporations.
Yes.
They manage assets worth over $10 trillion?
Trillion.
Trillion.
Wow.
That's more than the GDP of most countries.
That's crazy.
And their investment decisions,
Right.
they have this ripple effect throughout the whole global economy,
Wow.
affecting everything.
Like what?
Stock prices, interest rates,
Okay.
even government policies.
That's a lot of power.
It is. It's almost like they're playing by different rules
Right.
than the rest of us.
Yeah.
They can make or break companies,
Wow.
influence entire industries, and even sway government decisions.
That's intense.
And it's
Yeah.
all done behind closed doors
Sure
with
to.
very little transparency
Mhm.
or accountability to the public.
Yikes.
It raises some big questions about who benefits from our current economic system
Right.
and whether it really serves the many or just the few.
Yeah, that's a deep one.
That's a conversation for another deep dive.
Okay. Yeah.
For now,
Yeah.
let's turn our attention to something
For
that
now.
often gets brushed off as a conspiracy theory.
Like what?
The deep state.
That's an interesting one.
It is.
So what is the deep state?
Well, the term is often used to describe this network
Oh.
of unelected officials and bureaucrats
Okay.
who have a lot of influence,
Yeah.
no matter who the president is.
So they're always there.
Exactly. It's not necessarily about, like, some
Well,
secret group pulling strings.
right.
It's more about recognizing that power
Yeah.
can be, like, spread out, embedded within institutions.
Okay. And resistant to change.
Makes sense.
The article highlights this really fascinating example.
What is it?
President Jimmy Carter
Oh, yeah.
and his attempt to withdraw U.S. troops from South Korea in 1978.
What happened?
So Carter campaigned on this platform of peace
Okay.
and reducing America's military involvement around the world. And he had a clear mandate from the people to do this.
Right. They voted for him.
But he ran into this, like, wall of opposition.
I mean, who?
From the military.
Okay.
And the intelligence establishment.
What did they say?
They saw the withdrawal as a huge mistake.
What?
They thought it would weaken America's position in the region.
Right.
So even though Carter had the support of the American people, he faced this intense pushback from these, like, deeply entrenched interests, and they ended up undermining his efforts.
They stopped him.
Pretty much.
Wow. So even the president can be overruled.
It's a powerful example of how the deep state, whatever you want to call it,
can operate to protect its own interests and maintain the status quo even when it goes against what the people want.
That's crazy.
It is.
So it shows that power isn't always straightforward.
It's not. So if the president isn't truly the most powerful person, who is?
The big question.
And what does that mean for the future of American democracy?
That's what we need to figure out.
We'll explore these questions and more in part 2 of this deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about, what we think democracy should be.
It does. We tend to think of power as something, very obvious, very visible, held by the people we elect.
Right.
But what we've been talking about in this deep dive, it shows a different reality.
What's that?
It's a lot more intricate, a lot more layered.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And this idea of the deep state, as controversial as that term is, it helps us understand that power can be, like, kind of hidden or embedded in the institutions themselves.
Right. It's almost like an undercurrent, right?
That's right.
So it's not just about individuals or specific positions. It's about the systems themselves, the structures, and how they can just keep certain interests in power.
For sure.
No matter who's officially in charge.
Exactly. And that's what makes that story about President Carter so interesting.
Yeah, with the troops in Korea.
Right. You have a president who has this clear mandate. The people voted for him. But he gets blocked.
By the system.
By these entrenched interests.
It's a good way to put it.
It's like trying to steer a giant ship.
Ooh, I like that.
It's not just about turning the wheel. You have to think about the momentum, the currents, the sheer weight of the thing.
I love that analogy.
And I think understanding this is so important for, for anyone who wants to be an informed citizen.
An active citizen.
Yes. If you want to actually make a difference, you need to understand where the power really is and how it works.
Exactly.
So where are these concentrations of power?
Well, the article pointed to a few key areas. The military-industrial complex.
Of course.
Corporate lobbying.
Right.
And intelligence agencies. And what's fascinating is how these different power centers, they kind of overlap and reinforce each other. It creates this, like, web of influence.
It's hard to even see it sometimes.
It is. It's hard to untangle.
It really is. Like a big tangled knot.
Right. You pull on one thread.
Yeah.
And you realize it's connected to, like,
everything.
A dozen others.
Exactly. Like that revolving door thing we talked about. It's not just about individuals changing jobs.
Right.
It's about the relationships they build. The connection.
The access.
Exactly. Those connections can be super powerful.
Especially when it comes to making policy.
Absolutely. It's about who you know, what you know, and being able to influence decisions at the top.
And then you add in the influence of money.
Oh, yeah.
Through campaign contributions, lobbying.
Right.
And you start to see how a small group of people can have a huge impact.
It's kind of scary, isn't it?
It is. It's almost like a cycle.
What do you mean?
Powerful industries lobby for policies that help them, which then makes them even more powerful.
Right, more influence.
More influence. And that brings up this whole concept of systemic bias.
Interesting.
It's not necessarily about bad people doing bad things on purpose.
Right.
It's about the way the system itself is set up.
Yeah.
It's often structured in a way that favors certain interests over others.
Right. The system is biased.
And that brings us to a crucial question.
What is it?
Accountability.
Oh, right.
If power is so spread out, so embedded in the system, how do we hold people accountable?
Good question.
How do we make sure the system serves the people?
Right. Not just the powerful.
Instead of the other way around.
That's the million-dollar question.
It is. It's something democracies all over the world are struggling with.
I know. It's tough.
If we truly believe in democracy, that power comes from the people, then we have to find ways to make sure that power is shared fairly.
Absolutely.
And that those who have it are answerable to the public.
I agree.
So what are the solutions?
I don't know. That's the hard part.
The article didn't give easy answers, but it did stress the importance of awareness.
Right. Knowing what's going on.
And engagement.
Getting involved.
Exactly.
That's the first step.
I think so. We need to educate ourselves.
About
how power actually works, not just in the official structures of government, but in those informal networks of influence, too.
The behind-the-scenes stuff.
Yeah, the stuff we've been talking about.
We need to understand it.
We do. Things like campaign finance laws, lobbying regulations, the role of the media in shaping public opinion.
All of it.
All of it.
And we have to be willing to,
get involved.
Yes. Engage in the political process.
Exactly. Whether that's voting, contacting our representatives, or supporting organizations that are fighting for transparency and accountability.
It's not enough to just understand the problem. We have to do something about it.
Be proactive.
Exactly.
And that's where the real power is.
Right.
In people getting involved.
Yeah.
Informed citizens taking action together.
Collective action.
Yes. When people know what's going on and they raise their voices, that's when real change happens.
It's a good reminder.
Of what?
That even though the system might seem rigged, we can still make a difference.
You can.
We just have to be smart about it. We have to be persistent. And we have to work together.
Couldn't agree more.
Change might be slow.
It might be.
It might happen in small steps, but it is possible. It is. And understanding power, like we're doing in this deep dive, is a crucial first step.
Well said. Now, in the final part of this deep dive, let's shift gears a bit and look at some concrete examples of how these power dynamics play out in the real world.
Ooh, I like it. Getting specific.
Buckle up, because things are about to get real. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time talking about these centers of power that operate outside the traditional view of the presidency. But how do they actually use their power?
Right. Like, what does it look like in real life?
Let's get specific.
All right, let's do it.
One of the clearest examples is the pharmaceutical industry. And how they control drug prices.
It's a big one.
The article really highlighted how in the U.S., these companies can pretty much set whatever prices they want.
Right. The government doesn't really stop them.
And that leads to some crazy situations.
I bet.
Remember that drug we talked about?
Which one?
For severe infections?
Oh.
That went from $13 to $750.
Yeah, that was wild.
Overnight.
Basically.
That wasn't just the market doing its thing. No way. That was pure corporate power.
It shows you how profit can be put ahead of, people's health.
Absolutely.
And it's not a coincidence, right?
No.
It's a systemic issue. Years of lobbying. Campaign contributions. That revolving door between government and industry.
It's all connected.
Like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
Designed to,
make money.
Make as much money as possible.
Without thinking about the human cost.
Exactly.
And it's not just in healthcare. This happens in other areas, too.
Like where?
The article talked about agriculture.
Okay.
Big ag, these giant corporations. They've lobbied for policies that benefit, industrial scale farming, which often hurts smaller farmers.
Right.
And the environment.
It's that same pattern.
It is. Concentrated power, leading to policies that prioritize the profits of a few.
over the well-being of everyone else.
And it's not just domestic policy.
No.
Think about the military-industrial complex.
Oh, right.
It has a huge impact on foreign policy.
How so?
Well, if defense contractors are motivated by profit, that creates pressure to keep military spending high.
Right.
And to intervene in conflicts around the world.
More conflict, more weapons.
More weapons, more profit.
It's a vicious cycle.
It really is. And a costly one.
In many ways.
The human cost of war, resources being diverted from important things here at home, the risk of destabilizing entire regions.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. Yeah. It's kind of overwhelming when you realize how intertwined everything is.
It's true. It's like this web that spreads out from these power centers.
Affecting our healthcare, the food we eat, the wars we fight.
It's all connected.
Which is why it's so important for people to understand this stuff. Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah, when we understand how power works, we can challenge it.
We can demand accountability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can push for a system that actually works for the people.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive,
yeah,
I want to leave you with one final question.
Okay, hit me.
If the president isn't the one with all the power, who is?
That's the question.
And what does that say about American democracy?
Big questions.
Big questions. We don't have all the answers.
No.
But asking the right questions, that's the first step.
Towards what?
Towards creating a more just, equitable, and truly democratic society.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So keep questioning. Keep learning.
Keep pushing for a system
that
puts people first.
That's what this deep dive has been all about.